My name is Arthur, and for 10 years I was the unwitting financier of my own retirement, a retirement I was never meant to enjoy. The discovery was an act of grace, really. A storm had knocked out the power. My wife, Vivian, and our two sons, Ethan, 22, and Caleb, 19, were at a movie. I was alone in the dark, quiet house, navigating by the blue glow of a battery-powered lantern. I went into my home office to find a spare flashlight, and the beam caught the edge of my old fireproof lockbox where I keep passports, deeds, the physical artifacts of a life. It was slightly ajar. A pang of odd curiosity hit me. I lifted the lid. On top of the expected documents lay a sleek black leather portfolio. I didn't recognize it. I opened it. The first page was a vision board, but not the kind made from magazines. It was a digital printout, pristine and professional. A photograph of a stunning modern glass and cedar house overlooking a lake in the Pacific Northwest. Not our lake, a different one. A post-it note in Vivian's looping script was stuck to it. The sanctuary, post-transition. Transition. The word had a cold, clinical feel. I turned the page. What I found was not a dream. It was a blueprint, a business plan. Title: The Lakeshore Initiative, Phase 3, Execution. Subheader: Liquidation and Relocation Timeline, Post-Arthur's Retirement. My blood, which had been pumping warmly against the chill of the powerless house, turned to ice slurry. I sat down heavily in my desk chair, the lantern light trembling in my hand. It was a spreadsheet, more detailed and cruel than any corporate downsizing memo. Column A, marital asset. Our home, my 401k, my pension from 30 years as a civil engineer. Vivian's boutique, the boys' college funds. The investment portfolio I had managed for 2 decades. Column B, liquidation value. Column C, allocation. And column C did not have my name on it. It had codes: V-Trust, E-Fund, and C-Fund. Notes were written in a collaborative text with different colors. Vivian's in purple, Ethan's in blue, Caleb's in green. Next to our home's value, sell Q3 after A's retirement party. Capital forms base for sanctuary down payment, V. Under my 401k, liquidate upon A's access at 65. Tax hit acceptable. Distribute 50% V-Trust, 25% E-Fund, 25% C-Fund. A keeps pension for his living expenses, minimal, rural. E. My own son had written that. A. Not dad. A. An asset identifier. Next to my pension, his monthly income, sufficient for a modest rental near us, allows for monitoring. C. Monitoring. But the most devastating section was titled Contingencies and Risk Mitigation. Risk 1. A's emotional resistance. Mitigation. Frame move as fresh start for his golden years, closer to family. Use grandchildren narrative, future. V. Risk 2. A's attachment to current social circle. Mitigation. Gradually isolate by emphasizing downsides of current location, weather, costs. Facilitate digital connections only. E. Risk 3. Prolonged longevity draining resources. Mitigation. Encourage active lifestyle, hiking, etc. Structure finances so core assets are legally out of reach in irrevocable trusts. C. I read it again and again.
In the silent, dark house, the hum of the absent electricity was replaced by the roaring truth in my ears. My wife and my sons, the boys I'd taught to fish, to throw a spiral, to solve for X, had spent years, likely, coolly mapping my obsolescence. My retirement, the finish line I'd been trudging toward for 3 decades, was not a reward. It was a trigger, a signal for them to liquidate my life's work and convert it into their lakeside sanctuary, leaving me with a pension and a monitored rental nearby, like a retired family pet moved to a smaller kennel. I felt a detachment so complete it was peaceful. The hurt was a distant star. The betrayal was a scientific fact. I was looking at the fossil record of my family's love, and it showed a slow, deliberate extinction. To understand this calculated frigidity, you have to understand the family culture Vivian had engineered. She was the CEO of our home. A former marketing director, she'd applied those principles to our lives. We were a brand, the successful, close-knit Thorne family. Holidays were photo shoots. Achievements were press releases. Emotions were messy data to be smoothed into a compelling narrative. I was the foundation of the brand, steady, reliable, the silent partner in the background of the glossy pictures. My crime, it seemed, was my quiet contentment. I loved my job designing water treatment facilities. It was meaningful, if unglamorous. I loved my woodworking shop in the garage. I loved my weekly chess game with old Mr. Henderson next door. I did not aspire to a glass house on a lake. I was, in their eyes, underambitious. My value was not in my soul, but in my accrued assets in my imminent, harvestable retirement. I closed the portfolio. I placed it back exactly as I found it. I restored power to my mind before the house's lights flickered back on. This was not a family problem. It was a hostile takeover bid, and I had just discovered their entire merger plan. I did not rage. I did not weep. In my engineering mind, a new blueprint began to form, line by precise line. They saw me as a dormant asset to be liquidated. I would become a silent, patient creditor. My investigation was methodical. I accessed the shared family cloud drive they thought I was too technologically simple to navigate. I found folders going back 5 years, lakeside vision, financial modeling, post-A logistics. There were video calls they'd recorded, brainstorming sessions. Watching them was the true horror. Seeing my sons, men I'd raised, debate the tax efficiency of my pension with the casual ease of discussing a stock portfolio. Hearing Vivian say, the key is to make him feel it's his idea. He's always been susceptible to a well-framed narrative.
I obtained their credit reports. Ethan had significant credit card debt from launching a failed app. Caleb had private student loans Vivian didn't know about, at usurious rates. Vivian's boutique, the passion project I'd financed, was a money pit, secretly propped up by personal loans against our home equity, loans she'd forged my signature on. The Lakeshore Sanctuary was not just a dream, it was a financial Hail Mary to bail out their individual sinking ships. I was not their retirement plan. I was their insolvency solution. My revenge, therefore, was not about causing pain. It was about calling in the truth. They had amassed debts, financial, ethical, emotional. I would simply present the bill. I became the perfect mark. When Vivian began her soft launch about the benefits of the Pacific Northwest, I nodded thoughtfully. You might be right. The rain would be good for my gardening. When Ethan mentioned the booming tech scene there, I said, a fresh start for you boys would be wonderful. I funded their scouting trips to Washington under the guise of family vacations. I even, with sublime irony, suggested they meet with a great financial planner I read about to structure the move, a planner who was, in fact, my attorney in disguise, gathering more intelligence. Every dollar they spent on their dream, The architect's consultations, the non-refundable deposits on custom furniture for the sanctuary, the flights, the rental cars, came from accounts I controlled. I was the venture capitalist for my own demise, and they were burning through the seed round with gleeful abandon. While they were dreaming of cedar and glass, I was in my lawyer's office, executing my own plans. I legally separated my pension into an irrevocable trust that would pay only to me, and upon my death, to a charity for clean water initiatives. I removed Vivian's name from all investment accounts, citing a rebalancing strategy. I quietly refinanced the house in my name only, using a clause in the original deed she'd forgotten about, locking out her fraudulent equity line. I did not drain accounts. I fortified them. I had my forensic accountant prepare 3 individual dossiers. For Vivian, a complete audit of her boutique's real finances, the forged loan documents, and a legal opinion on the fraud, ready for the district attorney. For Ethan, a detailed report of his debts, the terms, and the potential for a judgment that would follow him for decades, coupled with evidence of his insider trading from his last job, a tidbit from a recorded Lakeshore call. For Caleb, his secret loan agreements, and evidence he'd plagiarized parts of his college thesis, which would trigger an academic review and debt acceleration.
The move date was set. Boxes were everywhere in our home of 25 years. They were giddy, flushed with the triumph of their long con. The closing on the sanctuary was scheduled for Friday. They were to fly out Thursday. On Wednesday evening, I called a family meeting to toast the new adventure. They gathered in the half-packed living room, glasses of the expensive champagne they'd bought for the occasion in hand. Vivian beamed. "To our next chapter, Arthur. You're going to love it." I didn't raise my glass. I set mine down. "Before we toast," I said, my voice the calm, steady tone I use to explain complex engineering problems to clients, "we need to settle the accounts. All projects require a final audit." They chuckled, thinking it was my awkward attempt at humor. "Vivian," I began, turning to her, "the boutique, it's insolvent. The loans you took against our home using my forged signature constitute felony fraud. I have the documents ready for the DA unless you sign this post-nuptial agreement tonight, relinquishing all claim to my pension, the investments, and accepting a one-time, modest settlement." I slid a folder toward her. Her smile froze, then cracked like old plaster. "Ethan," I continued, turning to my eldest, "your debt is approximately $87,000. Your former employer, TechVertex, has a zero-tolerance policy on insider trading. I have a recording of you discussing the Lakeshore funding timeline alongside non-public earnings data. You will sign this confession and repayment plan, or I send this to their general counsel and your creditors." Another folder. His face drained of all color. "Caleb," I said to my youngest, who already looked sick, "your private student loans have a moral turpitude clause. Plagiarism qualifies. They can call the full $120,000 due immediately. I have your thesis and the source material side by side. You will sign this agreement to enter a debt management program I control, or I forward this to the loan agency and your university's ethics board."
The room was utterly silent. The giddy energy had been vacuumed out, replaced by a chilling, suffocating dread. You've been spying on us?" Vivian whispered, her voice trembling with rage and terror. "No," I said. "I was auditing an investment. You presented me with a business plan, remember, in the lockbox? I simply did my due diligence. You planned to liquidate me. I've chosen to call in your debts instead." "You can't do this, we're your family," Ethan shouted, standing up. "Are you?" I asked, my first show of emotion, a simple, profound curiosity. Families don't itemize each other on spreadsheets. Families don't write mitigation strategies for a father's prolonged longevity. You are business partners who share my DNA, and this is a hostile takeover that has failed. Vivian found her voice, a sharp, legalistic one. I'll fight you in court for every penny, Arthur. I'll drag your name through the mud. I allowed a small, weary smile. With what money, Vivian? Your legal fund was in the joint account, which I've frozen pending fraud investigation. Your credit is tied to the boutique, which is finished. And do you really want a court to see the Lakeshore Initiative documents? To hear the recordings of your sons discussing how to manage A's emotional resistance? A judge would give you nothing and possibly refer Caleb and Ethan to prosecutors. This, I gestured to the 3 folders, is not a negotiation. It is the consequence of your own design. I stood up. The moving trucks come tomorrow. You will be on them. But you are not going to a lakeside sanctuary. You are going to the lives you can afford, based on the choices you made. Ethan, you have a friend's couch in Chicago. Caleb, your campus dorm is paid through the semester. Vivian, your sister's guest room in Florida is available. I have confirmed. And you? Vivian spat, tears of fury in her eyes. I said, looking around at the half-packed boxes of my life being taken apart, am staying. In my home, with my pension, my woodshop, my chess games. I am retiring, just not into the cage you built for me. The fallout was a silent, sprawling ruin. They signed. What choice did they have? Vivian got her small settlement and moved to Florida. Ethan is grinding in a low-level tech job, paying me back monthly. Caleb is on a strict allowance, working 2 jobs to stay in school.